Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of your favorite YouTube series. Our favorite YouTube series as well, not another demo. Uh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Matt, if this is truly your favorite YouTube series, then why haven't you guys done one of these in forever? And all I can say is 2023 was a very busy year for myself and Anthony and Aaron, who I have with me as well, the really bad security crew. But heading into 2024, we plan on being as legit as we have ever been with this podcast. And so we're getting things started by talking to legit security. What a perfect way to get this year off and running. So we have with us Joe Nicastro. He's the field CTO for Legit Security. And with that, Joe, I'm going to pass it over to you, let you introduce yourself. But the one question that I always like to ask is, in an era where we have endless amounts of meetings, why would a company want to carve out 30 minutes to an hour to talk to Legit Security?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. Super stoked to be on this podcast and then have the opportunity to talk to y'all. Like you mentioned, my name is Joe Nicastro, field CTO for Legit Security. Been in AppSec for quite a while. Had the opportunity to work for a number of different, application security tools, companies, and things like that. One of the main reasons why I'm at Legit and why I think that we're doing something super important in the space is largely the shift that we've seen in the attacks that are happening within the application security space, right? I think 10 years ago we really saw a lot of things around the SQL injections, cross-site scriptings, the generic OWASP top 10 issues that are typically being taken care of by a lot of the traditional AppSec tools on the market. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a very large shift into the supply chain attacks that we've seen happen. The cyberlinks, the code coves, the PyTorches, all of these different types of attacks that are really taking place due to things like exposed secrets in your code, misprivileged or misconfigured, software. Source control management systems or build systems and things like that. So really here at Legit, we're trying to take a much more holistic approach to security and really give you an understanding of what's happening across your entire supply chain and be able to correlate all of those things to give you better risk posture management.
All right. Well, Mr. Brigg, this is your space, so I'm waiting for you to jump in with all of your hot take questions before we hit them with anything else.
No, this is good timing on some of these. Joe, kind of like just before we started recording, we talked about how we're in this weird state with secure software development lifecycle, right? Traditionally in the past, we had like SAST, static application scanning, right at the beginning. The code was created, then we got into our workflow where we're able to use the DAS tool, right? Dynamic application scanning, right? And then your life cycle in theory was complete. One of the things that we had run to in the healthcare system that I work for is as we move towards the continuous innovation, continuous delivery, we were starting to notice that the DAS part was getting in the way, right? Because if you run a good tool the right way, it can take several hours for that to complete. That doesn't necessarily jive with something, especially maybe not with us, but like a Netflix, right? They're doing multiple releases a day, so they don't really have time to do those 3-hour scans. Additionally, with the advent of like ChatGPT, right? Now we're seeing a situation to where you're augmenting code, right? So how do we know where, that code that's being created in ChatGPT, where does it fit in the pipeline, right? So for some of our use cases, right, are a good example of, the two approved use cases in this secure software development lifecycle are like a code conversion, right? So pretty straightforward. You're taking, one system that is using like PL SQL, right? And you're straight up, using it to convert to SQL. Okay. Obviously, you do peer review, that's going to be a little less a threat. But then you have a situation where you're, using Python, right? So now you have data analytics teams that, no programming, right? But they're more data analytics, data informatics kind of. Now they're delving in the world because they have the ability of ChatGPT to create that Python code for them to go get the data. What are you guys seeing now as we've matured the shift left, right? And now we're getting in the crazy world that is not only human generated code, but now AI generated code.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I think it lends well to the whole reason why we've seen application security posture management companies come to fruition. And I think the first reason is because, to your point, static analysis, dynamic analysis, software composition analysis, these tools are very good at what they do. They find a lot of things. And I think at the end of the day, what ends up happening is most organizations are getting inundated by all of these different types of alerts. Pair that with something like shift left, where now we're taking all of these alerts and we're basically moving them over to the developer team, who is not incentivized to fix security findings because that's not how they're, that's not how they're KPI'd. We've basically just taken all of these findings and moved them to a team that is not really positioned well to be able to triage this or remediate this in the way that they should be, right? So two answers to that question, right? I think the first piece is contextual prioritization, right? I think one of the things that we really need to focus on as an industry is, as we start to find all of these hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities, understand which of those are the most pressing to our overall organization, and start to shift left with more context, or start to pick out what it is that we want developers to actually focus on, right? Because I think at the end of the day, when everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, and you're just you're gonna put that developer in a place where they feel like they're overwhelmed, and so therefore they're just not going to touch anything, and they're going to continue working on the things that, again, they're incentivized to work on, right?
100%.
Secondarily, to your point about, a lot of what we're seeing around AI and LLM and stuff like that, it's another continuation of what we're seeing in application security, where the sprawl of attack surface is just getting larger, right? And it's something that's continually happening, especially as we start to see the lines blur between application security and cloud security, and different types of, build pipeline security and things like that, where, I start to have this philosophy that I think maybe AppSec isn't the best way to approach this. Maybe we need to start focusing on a product security framework, or a mentality where all of this, combines into an overall product security. So with regards to AI and LLM, some of the things that we're doing on our side is one, helping organizations understand, where do you even have these particular items, right? Oftentimes we meet with, Fortune 100 organizations, and we say, hey, what are you guys doing about AI and LLM? And the answer we get back from the CISOs are, well, we don't do any of that, right? Like, we're not touching that yet. It's not something that we have
That they
policy
know
about.
of. I
Yeah, exactly.
guarantee you, whether it's
Exactly.
on a corporate device or not, AI is assisting.
Yeah, yeah. Happens all the time, right? Where we finally get into these organizations, we're running a POV, or they get onboarded, and then they realize, hey, wait, 60% of my repositories have some form of AI or LLM, frameworks in them, right? Or they find out that 90% of their developers are using something like Copilot, right? So I think first step is getting that visibility, right? Where do you have it within your organization? How is it being used? And then secondarily, once you understand where these particular tools are being used, do you have proper controls or policies in place to prevent a lot of that risk that's coming in, right? So a good example would be your developers using Copilot, right? I think everybody understands that Copilot is a great boon to developer productivity, but it comes with risks, right? It comes with those risks of, are your developers potentially bringing in code that is under some kind of licensing or IP, or does it have vulnerabilities and things like that, right? So it's a matter of not just knowing who's using Copilot, but then pairing it with other types of controls, right? Do you have proper code review within those pipelines for the developers that are using Copilot, so that there is a human intervention point to double check on this before we're just, throwing it into our product?
So when I think of kind of, because you said that, so legit, structures itself as a posture code, AppSec, kind of posture management platform. And so in my non-devy mind, right, I have to kind of translate it or shift it, not only in my mind, but to my leaders on, because if we look at what CSPM is for us, right? And so this is kind of translating that, into AppSec. And, for me, some of these tools don't really show their value without minimum investment first. So would you say that, in order for legit to be successful, you do have to have somewhat of an AppSec program, even if it's just SAST or DAST? Like you need something. Like, is your tool alone going to be able to fix or show me things without any sort of other technology involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So I would say our traditional ICP or our traditional customer that we have the most success with is probably in the middle of that maturity, right? They've already rolled out some level of application security tooling. They're starting to get inundated with findings. And now they really need something to, really aggregate all of that as well as do a lot of the correlation and the context piece behind it, right? With that said, I do think that there's a lot of thought leadership that we're trying to push on our side about gaining visibility into your overall program before you start throwing tools at it, right? I think over the last 10, 15 years, the philosophy has been, in order for me to build a proper AppSec program, I need to go buy a SaaS tool, I need to go buy a DAS tool, I need to throw these things in. But oftentimes what ends up happening is as you go buy these tools, most security teams don't even know, what does that overall landscape look like? How much do I need to roll this out or onboard? Where are all of my applications? Where are my pipelines and things like that? So that visibility becomes a problem, right? Secondarily, again, I think we've seen a very large shift into the way that these attacks are happening, where the primary focus is no longer on individual flaws or individual vulnerabilities within a particular application. Again, like we talked about, the SQL injections or things like that, where now malicious attackers are starting to realize that if I can get into an overprivileged build system, I can change that code and add some malicious, payload and now affect hundreds of clients or hundreds of customers as opposed to spending all that time on one, right? So within our platform, again, if you have a program already and you have a lot of these application security tools, that's great. We can kind of come in and start to show you where do you have those controls in place? How are they being used? Are they being used properly? Do you have any areas for maybe potential tool consolidation, things like that, as well as giving you the prioritization around the different types of vulnerabilities that you have. But with that said, even if you're a less mature customer and you have none of those tools, there's really benefit to getting a tool like Legit in to get the visibility of your overall landscape. Where's your code coming from? What types of build tools is it going through? Where does it end up in your production environment? And then again, do you have any particular, misconfigurations or vulnerable plugins inside of that build structure that could potentially be opening you up to, again, some of these larger attacks that we're seeing?
So we talk about visibility. How are you integrating, or what's the architecture for you to gain that visibility? Because if I'm coming in from, the outside, so to speak, of my own developers, and let's say, that I don't know if they're in Azure DevOps, GitHub, text files on their C drive, like I don't know what their day-to-day operations are. How are you plugging in and helping me find those things and gaining visibility, from start to finish of that landscape?
Yeah. So this is one of the really nice things about our platform is you can really connect into whatever tools you already have, and then from there we'll do discovery both left and right. So for instance, most of our organizations that we work with are plugging us directly into their code repos, right? Because they know that those exist, and then from there we'll automatically do an analysis to understand what types of build tools are actually communicating with that overall code repo using things like visibility into YAML files, webhooks, etc., to understand, again, where is that code flowing through? Is it going to a Jenkins server? Is it going to Azure DevOps? And then from there, what types of maybe artifact registries or even production environments is it flowing through? However, we have other customers, to your point, that are like, I don't know how many code repos my organization has. However, we have a standard build pipeline that everybody's forced to go through. Okay, great. Integrate us into that. And now we can show you exactly where all the code is coming from and start to do a lot of discovery around those those different code repos that you may not know you have, right? So part of our premise for visibility is not only plugging into and integrating into the things that you do have, but then also doing a lot of the discovery to find a lot of those shadow IT, again, build servers, code repos, production environments that you maybe didn't even realize, right? Did I have a developer that was trying to get around all of my controls in my golden pipeline by creating their own Jenkins server and spinning it up and having that feed into my production environment?
This ties nicely into what you're talking about, where more and more companies, I think, going forward are going to have to, I was specific when I said secure software development life cycle, right? The key words being life cycle, because traditionally we focus so much on the AppSec, application security part of it. But as you have more cloud development, more hybrid development, it does feel like going into into that we're in the early part of 2024, that we need to really look at it as like almost like a cloud SecOps model, right? Especially if you're going to be using tools like Microsoft Copilot. I guess my
Careful,
question
Greg. If
is
you
now
if you
that
come up with new acronyms, Gartner's going to come after you. If you got cloud DevOps, like, they'll watch it.
yeah, Gartner and I already have our issues, but that's neither here nor there. But it sounds like you guys are positioning yourself, because to Anthony's point, what are other things that you can like connect into? Can you tie into code repos like, Microsoft GitHub and, Bitbucket and stuff like that at the API? Like, is it at an API level? Like, where are your connection points to allow you to be able to see into the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, absolutely, we can tie into all of the major Git repositories that we're seeing out there, right? So your Azure DevOps, your GitLabs, your GitHubs. We also integrate into things like Perforce, all at an API level, right? So typically, what we're looking for is something like a global access token or a personal access token to get us visibility into those code repositories. Same goes for the build servers, right? So your Azure DevOps, your Jenkins servers, things like that, Circle CI, whatever that may be. We can tie into all of those. We also integrate into a number of different Kubernetes environments. So if you're using something like EKS or even just a vanilla version of Kubernetes, we can kind of tie into those. And then to the point that we were making earlier, all of the security tools that go along that process, right? So your static analysis, your dynamic analysis, your software composition analysis, all the way through to your cloud security posture management tools, right? So the Wizzes, the Orcas, the CrowdStrikes of the world will integrate into all of those, and really with the goal of not just giving you the visibility of, what does that pipeline look like, where is code starting and where is it ending up, but then again also to be able to do that correlation and aggregation of vulnerabilities, so that you're not actually having to set up policies and or enforce policies across 5, 6, 7 different tools in your environment. You can really start to bring all of those into one tool, enforce all of those policies in one place. The other benefit that it gives you is as you start looking at different things like compliance, right? SSDF, ISO, FedRAMP, whatever that may be, SALSA, things like that. Oftentimes we talk to organizations and it's a very fragmented process to understand where they have gaps in those compliances, because they have a multitude of tools where these controls are coming from, right? So having a control plane like Legit gives you the ability to aggregate all of that and then start to build out a cohesive compliance program where now we can start to say, hey, if you're FedRAMP, here's all the controls you have in place. Here's where you're missing particular controls, and here's how you could go about fixing them.
Well, it's good, right? Because I have a new saying that I don't get to claim as my own, but Anthony's gonna laugh on this, talking about how, everybody talks about, the single pane of glass, right, to look at visibility. And I can speak for myself and a little bit for Anthony when we say, these are now turned into a single glass of pain. Right.
You stole
So
that from me.
uh, so understanding that, sometimes it seems like simplifying would help, but in the end, that can also like be a pain. So that's where I like where you're talking about, where if you have different entry points, you're, into visibility, they let that life cycle visibility that helps a lot. Are you seeing along those lines, are you seeing a lot of companies starting to realize that with data analytics is now you have your data analysts, your data scientists, and everything else? Like they're becoming developers. They're just, it's not web developers. Like, so for example, we have re-stood up what used to be a web development center of excellence. Right now, our enterprise architecture, we don't even say there's no web, right? Because we have web development teams, we have application development teams, and we have data development teams. So this is truly a new world. So where you having people use, R and Python, and they weren't traditionally not traditional developers. Are you guys pivoting to be able to get to help in that space?
So our platform is completely language agnostic, right? So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what type of code you're writing. It doesn't really matter, how you're using that code, right? I would say from our perspective, looking at all of the code across your web, cloud, data analyst type teams is beneficial because it does give us the ability to kind of bring out that holistic story, right? So to your point earlier about that single glass of pain, I think one of the reasons why that's caused is because oftentimes, or in the past, we looked at the single pane of glass as purely aggregators, right? And I don't think aggregation is the problem that we're trying to solve. And I don't really think that that's the direction that we need to head in the market, right? I think the better story there is not just the aggregation, but the context that comes behind having all of these things together, right? So as I start to merge in, the data analyst type code, it gives me an understanding of what types of data models are being brought in. Where do I see things like sensitive data that might be running through these particular applications? Gives us another layer of, again, context and prioritization, right? Where now I can start saying things like, hey, across my entire organization, here's a subset of applications that are specifically dealing with, a large amount of compliances that we run through. They're maintaining, most of our revenue for our particular organization, and they also touch a lot of sensitive data. These are the things that we need to fix first. And this is the reason why I think this correlation is so important, right? Instead of me just dumping everything into a big giant bucket and saying, well, here's all of it, go ahead and sort through it on your own, which I think is has been historically the way that we've looked at application security aggregation tools. I think our goal here is more to, again, bring the understanding of, hey, of those 100,000 things, if you only have 2 hours to fix something, here's the top 10 things that you need to fix immediately because they have absolutely the most risk to your organization. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. Thank you.
So one of the things I know with a lot of application security tools is the developer buy-in of using them. So is there, I guess, where does the responsibility of implementing legit sit? What effect does that have on the developers? How does that work from getting the buy-in to actually leveraging the platform?
Yeah, so the nice thing about Legit is it can be completely developer agnostic on the rollout, meaning we don't necessarily need developer buy-in in order to get the product onboarded. And honestly, there's a lot of value to the platform above and beyond the developers even knowing it exists, right? Again, going back to what we were talking about with regards to hardening your build processes or even prioritizing those overall vulnerabilities or setting a universal policy across your organization can all be done in the background without your developers even knowing this exists. However, the real power becomes in that, again, ability to shift left with prioritization, right? So we do have the capability of integrating into things like Jira. We can send emails, we can send webhooks. We work with a number of different automation tools like Torque, where again, you can kind of integrate and set up whatever workflows you want so that you can start to push these particular findings to developers where they're living. Again, nobody wants to give a developer another tool. They have enough already. So kind of making sure that we live in those tools, but where the real benefit from that developer comes from is largely in the lack of alert fatigue, right? Or the slowing down of that alert fatigue that they're getting by saying, hey, we don't need to send everything to them. We need to just basically set a particular policy around very real risk that we want to get addressed and then send that to the developer, right? So I think that's where at the end of the day, the developer buy-in from their side comes in is they're able to understand if something's being sent to me by a legit, I know that it's real. I know that it's something that's been prioritized because there's a subset of rules and policies in the background that have kind of filtered out all of the garbage that we don't need to look at.
So one of the other things whenever I'm talking with a vendor that I'm curious about is not just the sales process or the technology, but what is it like being a customer of an organization so that a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, I'm still in love with the acquisition that I made and I'm not trying to replace it with something else. So can you talk a little bit about from a support standpoint, an ongoing support standpoint, what it is like for a customer working with Legit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a full customer success team. Our goal is to not only work with you to help you get onboarded, but then also help mature that overall program. Understand what are your overall initiatives, where are the gaps that you're trying to solve for, in order to, again, help get this rolled out. We have a number of very, very large customers. Our focus, to be completely honest, is in that Fortune 500 or above, right? Anybody who's developing code at scale tends to be a really good fit for us. And one of the things that I will say is in the 3 years that we've been out and have been selling our platform, we've yet to churn a single customer, right? So everybody that has purchased Legit over the last 3 years has maintained that purchase, has expanded out, has done renewals. So they're seeing value in the platform and continuing to work with us as we move forward.
What does the last question I have is in terms of like the actual process of going through it, what does the POC or what does that pre-sales process look like working with you guys as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then to add on to that, what is the like licensing model? Are you guys per developer, per repo? Like how are you pricing it out?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer the latter first. So as far as our licensing model, it's per developer, so per active contributing developer. So again, if you're integrating us into a code repo, we can essentially start off in a smaller subsection of your overall organization if you have multiple code repos or something like that, to kind of do a slow roll process, or we can kind of connect into everything and touch all of your active contributors, right? So that's largely how we license on our side. Everything in the platform right now is a singular SKU, so you'll get all of the feature set that we have within that licensing model. And then to answer the second question with regards to, what does a POV look like with us? One of the nice things about Legit is it's a very easy lift to get in, right? I think we're all used to a lot of the traditional AppSec tools where you've got to embed them into your overall pipelines, or you've got to embed them into IDE scanners, things like that. It becomes very, very laborious. Because of the fact that we're all API driven, like we had talked about earlier, I can connect into your source control management system very, very easily within a couple of minutes, just by getting that personal access token that has the permissions that we need into that overall tool, right? And then from there, we're offering visibility and actual analysis on our side within a few hours. Oftentimes, our POV processes typically last anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on, again, what is that success criteria? What are you trying to solve for? And how much of the organization can we initially spin out into in order to get that entire visibility? I'll also mention, because of the nature of what we do, not everybody is super comfortable with sharing their access into their source code or their build tools with a SaaS product, right? So on that prem, we do have an on-prem version as well, right? So we offer both flavors for organizations that do want to have a little bit more control over their implementation of the product.
Yeah, and that's definitely something, not with every company, but with some companies that becomes like a critically important aspect of it. So, well, fellas, I learned something today. I learned that even though it's been a while since we've done one of these, we still kind of know how to do it. So congrats to us. Huge pats on the back to all of us involved of still knowing how to actually have a conversation with a vendor I don't think we butchered too many acronyms today. There was an occasional one that was thrown in there, but I think we did a pretty good job of staying away from them and all the other fun stuff that is not another demo. I also learned that if you want to strengthen your security posture when it comes to your application and your SDLC, you should definitely take a look at Legit Security. So with that, Joe, thank you for being a part of this. Hopefully it was fun for you as well. And we will see everyone real soon for episode 41. Thanks, everybody.